let me start with a show of hands. Who of you predominantly works in Web3 or blockchain? Okay. Now, keep your hand raised if you're getting more client demand that you can actually serve. Okay, we have a couple of them, but not everybody. Why is not everyone in this room keeping their hands raised? The answer is, it's all about the business value. In a recent survey where we interviewed 60 decision takers that have budgets to spend on blockchain solutions, the #1 purchasing criteria is business value. Technical features actually rank #7. And as one client has putting it, end users have actually very little interest in the tech unless they are playing around with it. Tech is mainly a consideration for IT and developers. So my name is Tibor Mérey, and I lead the Web3, blockchain, IoT, and extended reality topic at the Boston Consulting Group globally. And in the next 20 to 30 minutes, I want to share 3 things with you. #1, based on our experience in the space, where do we see the current state of enterprise adoption of blockchain? #2, where are the promising areas where we see adoption happening today? And #3, I want to leave you with 4+1 thing that you can take away to get your services adopted faster. Now, we have conducted more than 180 blockchain-related projects at the Boston Consulting Group. So what is the takeaway of this slide? Around 40 to 50% of the work we do actually for the tech companies of this world, for the layer 1 blockchains, for the software companies, for the telco operators. But the other 50 to 60% is actually for corporates adopting the technology. Now, based off this experience, where would we place the current state of Web3? I would say we're entering the 4th phase of Web3. All of us have been part of the previous phases. It has started centered around digital currencies. It has moved onto smart contract and dApp capabilities, and has added digital ownership as well. Now, the phase we are in today, we will call embedded Web3 or embedded blockchain, adding that technology deep into the stacks and the supply chains of corporates around the world. Now, many of you know the Gartner hype cycle. We are all part of that roller coaster, and I'm not going to belabor you on the individual points on that slide. But the key observation here is that none of the blockchain applications put on this slide have yet reached a plateau of productivity. Now, why do we still remain bullish on Web3 and blockchain? We remain bullish not because of the inherent benefits that blockchain gives. Those are not new. Those go all the way back to 2008 and the original white paper. But what is starting to change now is that we see the proof points in the industry. We see incumbents from the financial industry, but also from the tech world, that are embarking on these technologies. We see high levels of investment now entering the space. And that leads us to the conclusion that blockchain is going to be the protocol layer that governs the relationships and transactions of an augmented world. So let me take you on a journey into this augmented world to showcase how broad the applications are that we see in our daily work. Now, this is a view of a simplified city with many different sectors and applications. And the power of blockchain is that it's actually cutting across all of these. So let me share a couple of stories what we as BCG have been able to actually guide our corporate clients with in the past couple of years. One example is Tracer. Tracer is a venture we have built for De Beers, the diamond, one of the biggest diamond distributors and producers in the world. Now, Tracer enables proof of provenance from mine to finger of diamonds and has by now established itself as the de facto standard of proving where a specific diamond has come from. So this is a very nice use case where blockchain, with its unique capabilities of immutability, transparency, and so on and so forth, is a prime technology to actually establish that trust in products. The nice thing, however, is that we see that happening time and again across industries. And another example is actually Klöckner, another public example I'm allowed to talk about. Now, for those who don't know Klöckner, they are a German steel manufacturer, and for their green steel product line, BCGX has built a digital product passport that, again, on-chain proves the level of CO2 that went into a specific product. Now, the nice thing is that the customers of Klöckner can use that digital product passport and propagate it as they are then building in those components into their machines and products. So that is starting to emerge as a pattern across industries that we see repeated in consumer goods, that we see repeated in cement, in steel, as I said, in other products across the world. Now, the financial system is becoming aware of this. Tokenization of assets as well as securities is a big, big thing. We at BCG, we estimate that by 2030, 16 trillion of assets will be tokenized. And that will not just be securities or bonds, that will also include real-world asset tokenization. And that will lend itself to a much more innovative, much more decentralized financial system built around decentralized finance, but on a much bigger scale and going much deeper into tokenization of real-world assets. Those assets can include tokenization of real estate, tokenization of produce, tokenization even of cargo ships. Now, looping back to one of the very earliest use cases of blockchain, we see that payments are also on a fast track towards blockchain adoption. And why do I say this? In our global payments report, we actually saw in the past 4 years an uptick of digital and mobile wallets as a means of payment by 7 percentage points. The other interesting bit is that this comes at the expense, actually, of cash. So the world is moving towards means of digital payments, but they are forgoing the benefits of cash. Now, here again, blockchain can play a vital role in doing so in a trusted manner. I briefly mentioned the topic of smart contracts, which is not a new technological topic, but we see now adoption of these use cases as well. An example here is instance claims processing. Now, Etherisk is a service which actually embeds the payout of a damage, or in this case in the claims, because of a flood, for example, directly into the smart contract layer. And using Oracle technology, it actually brings that real-world information on-chain, and the disbursement of funds is doing so automatically. Now, another example in this augmented world goes into the whole topic of decentralized physical infrastructure called DePIN. Many of you know Helium, one of the very prominent examples that is making mobile network infrastructure decentralized. So any one of us could be operating a router or a mobile hotspot and can be remunerated today. Now, one thing that I would say is that all of these different use cases, they are only, I would say, in the proto stage of what's to come. Because up until now, many of the fundamental technologies are not scaled in a fashion like they need to be. But we see the interest from corporates, we see first pilots, and we see that also consumers are starting to embrace that idea. Now, what does this mean for all of us and all of you? How can we be part in driving adoption and actually address that number one purchasing criteria, which is business value? It is really around answering 4 key questions. And they have to be answered in that order, I'm sorry. The first question is, does it matter? Does it actually solve a burning problem of your customers? And that's the number one question we all need to ask ourselves. Not the technical ones. That's the number one questions we need to be thinking of very, very hard. And it shouldn't be problems that are nice to have. It should be the burning problems that keep them up at night today. And another way of putting it is you need to follow the money. Is somebody willing to pay for it? Not because, it's interesting, people want to dabble around with it, innovate, and so on, all that good stuff. No, is somebody willing to pay money for it? Question number 1. Question number 2, will it work? 83% of unicorns have actually stuck to the original product vision that they had. So is your solution really the right one for this one? And we need to be self-critical. Too often, blockchain has been used as a hammer looking for a nail. And we need to turn this around. We need to start with the nail. That nail needs to be a rusty one that's hurting, that's really, you want to get rid of it. You want to hammer it home. And you need to find the right solution for it. And does it really solve the problem? Will it work? The third question is then, can we win? With our product, with our technology, are we differentiated enough? Can we actually be the one solving that problem? What is our unfair advantage? What is it? Is it a piece of technology? Is it a piece of IP? Is it a piece of other assets? Is it relationships, access? What is it? And how do I sustain this with the right culture? So important. Can we win? And then last but not least, you can do number 1, you can do number 2, you can do number 3, and you get a beautiful POC. Beautiful. But the fourth question is, will it grow? Can you build a business around it that can sustain itself? Can you actually have a scalable solution? Coming back to the technology before, will that scale globally? Will that scale across a world where billions of devices are connected, where AI comes on top of it? Is it scalable? And does it really change the game, or you're just an incremental benefit? And to put that last thing into numbers, I keep telling myself, your solution needs to have at least a 30 to 40% benefit versus the status quo. Why do I say that? Every CIO I work with gets these pitches day in, day out. So the first thing they do is they halve the impact, because obviously we're trying to sell them something, and they double the amount of time it takes to get there. So if you do that math, you get to really small numbers. And if those numbers get too small, inertia kicks in. Because in most of the cases, there is a system that is running somehow. And there will be investment and complexity needed to rip that system out and replace it. So you need to overcome that inertia. And you only get to those inertia-defying impacts if you are at least in a 30 to 40% improvement over the status quo. Now, those are 4 key questions that I wanted to share, and I'm going to share you now with another observation, maybe as a bit of a motivation for all of us, before I have a gift, and I really want to open it up also for Q&A. I come from Vienna, but so does Arthur Schopenhauer, and Arthur Schopenhauer has coined the truth hype cycle. Already in the 1800s, and every truth undergoes 3 stages. Stage number 1, it is ridiculed. Stage number 2, it is violently opposed. Violently opposed. And stage number 3, it has been self-evident from the beginning. So with this, I leave you with a gift from myself, which is my personal blockchain and Web3 reading list, and I'm very happy to open it up for Q&A. I think we have a question over there in the middle.
Yeah.
One in the front and one in the middle.
Okay.
Thanks for the 4 questions. I was very keen to see, in terms of practical implementation, what is the difference between a failed startup and a successful unicorn?
What's the difference between a failed startup?
Startup and then a
successful and a unicorn? And maybe I'll go back to that page just that we get it again. I think in the end, it's most likely a mix between some of these questions here. I think that a lot of it actually goes wrong at the very first 1 or 2 questions. Like, does it really matter? And I think one component how you can overcome that between a failed startup and a unicorn is that you talk to customers very, very early on. Because if you get too hung up with the will it work or can we win question, is it the right technical solution, is it mature enough or not, sometimes you forget talking to the customers. And so the work we do with BCGX, which is our build unit at BCG, is that we actually talk very, very early to customers. And oftentimes only with a mock-up, only with a demo, only with even the landing page, and we get that feedback to say, if that product works the way we show you, would you buy it? What would you like about it? And we in parallel get the tech done. So that is, I think, a big, big one that you need to get right. And then I think the other one is really the second filter is between the can we win and can we grow. Too many blockchain projects get stuck in the POC valley. We have so many POCs out there, I can't even hear the word anymore. And I think here again, it is for me a mixture between technology and culture. And what do I mean by it? I think on technology, there is value in having a future-proof technology in the way you implement it, both from the choice of blockchain, the choice of integrations into Web2 infrastructure, and thinking through that right from the beginning. And the second one with culture, I mean, is it's not just about being able to step it up, maybe with external help or with a project team. How can you sustain a culture where blockchain or other emerging technologies get tried out and tested on an ongoing basis? Because guess what? If you took a decision today, in a year from now, you might have to revisit that decision. And also, a pilot or a use case that you have discarded a year ago might be mature now to go with. And having that mindset and that culture to be able to kind of build the muscle to test and learn and launch, I think that's the second key part as well. There's the next question in the middle, and then I think in the back.
All right. Thank you for your insight. My question is, you show me like hundreds of projects tried by big organization to adapt Web3 technologies. And I'm in this industry for a while and seeing that kind of trial with enterprise, with blockchain technology, I don't see so many successful projects coming, really in the production level. So from your viewpoint and your experience, what is the biggest problem for technology side? You told me that the business side, they didn't have needs or stuff like that. Yeah. I understand that part, but is there any technology side, any problem for of the Bitcoin current blockchain? We from BSB and we try to be better, good technological solution with a big scalabilities. But what do you see? What is your experience from your experience? What is the problem of technology side right now on the blockchain? Not be able to be used.
Yeah. So if I understand the question correctly, it is around, you say, yes, there are many, let's say, pilots happening, but there's not much successful production-grade implementations. And to what degree, so what are the reasons and what kind of role does the technology play in those reasons? If I'm honest with you, I don't think that only technology has been the reason that it hasn't taken off. I think that also the definition is, what is the definition of success? I think you're referring to scaled kind of production use cases. And the thing is, in order to get to scale today, you really need to tap into existing Web 2 flows and you need to migrate them to Web 3 or on blockchain, right? Now, in order to do so, you're typically not in a controlled environment where you're alone, right? You always have an ecosystem approach where you might have, for example, in the element of identity, you have the issuers, you have the holders, you have the verifiers, and those all have different incentives. Now, I think one positive example where we see decentralization, Web3, decentralized identity take off is in Europe, but that one is driven by regulation with EIDAS 2, which forces now issuers and verifiers of identity to adopt decentralized architectures. And so here we suddenly start having that escape velocity where we start having critical masses of, in this case, identity credentials being issued, but also we force the verifiers to adopt the technology as well. And I think there we are on a very positive path to unlock then kind of that network effect. And on that one, I don't think, it is a technological problem. Verifiable credentials have been around for quite some time. Identity can be solved very well through decentralized technology, but it has taken regulation to do so. Now, the good thing is that this catches on. We see other geographies like the Middle East who are not regulated by EIDAS 2 directly, but they are adopting some of these concepts very early on, or also emerging countries that want to use the technology in order to actually bank the unbanked in order to provide identity and government services to the ones who are not yet benefiting from it. So I would say technology helps a lot because I would say BSV starts to now bring the scalability into that opens up new opportunities. But it's not just about that. We need to be able to translate that into an actual business value to the decision takers around us. There was a question in the back, and then afterwards one in the front and here as well.
Hi, thank you so much for your presentation. As you talk about the importance of business value and other factors than just technology being the driving forces of Web3 adoption, and given the number of projects that you've done quite internationally, I'd be curious to hear about your impression in terms of the current status of Web3 in the UK specifically, and any other markets that you think is worth noting in terms of their maturity and fast-tracked adoption, and what might be the driving forces behind that?
It's a very good question. So I do think we see heterogeneity in terms of Web3 adoption. And I would say it's to me the two biggest forces are, to one degree, regulation, I have to say, and to the other degree, I would say the openness to technological, advancements, and also to some degree, Generation Z and the youth, kind of how they're adopting it. Why do I say this? I think regulation, as I have said, with EIDAS 2, but also on, for example, the whole CBDC discussion, is a driving force behind it. It's not a coincidence that in that evolution of Web3, I said it actually all started with digital currencies, right? That is typically a very tangible way of kickstarting the whole decentralization and blockchain topic, and it has ripple effects then to other kind of real world use cases. And there, I would say we do see an uptick in overall CBDC projects. I mean, some of them are more successful than others, but they are happening across the globe. And I think there it's actually quite interesting. The emerging countries, they might actually be a very interesting place to look at because, again, they are sometimes hit with high inflation and loss of trust in the traditional banking system and so on and so forth. So that's, I think, one fact. I think the other thing is, from a consumer perspective, we do see, a lot of the work we do in ourselves, we see actually a higher share of projects in Asia and in Europe compared to our overall mix where the US is much bigger. And I'm asking myself, why is that, right? Because typically we always would expect the US to be leading in new technologies. And I haven't yet got the answer to it. I would say that one reason is that I think Europe, paradoxically, has been regulated so hard on privacy and GDPR that actually now the whole decentralization here becomes an asset because I would say they are leading in terms of regulatory framework around AI, that's too, and identity and so on and so forth. So they're almost creating a virtue out of that. And Switzerland, where I'm actually born, I was born in Zug, so maybe that was also a reason for me to go into blockchain later on, is actually at the forefront here in terms of also innovation and so on and so forth. And on the other side, maybe also the advantages that the big tech companies in the US have are now a bit of a burden because they risk disruption by decentralized versions of their products. So I don't see them being at the absolute forefront in this regard. Apple is not a leader in blockchain. Yeah? Microsoft is adopting some bits and pieces, but it's more like infusing their core offerings. So we see a bit of heterogeneity around the world, but I think the jury is still out how fast it gets adopted in which country. I think there was, I think the colleague, the man in the front was first, and then maybe to the back. Was there one more? Yeah, so one here, and then over there.
Yeah, thank you. I think there are a few things missing, I feel, with the will it work, can we win, and will it grow? It's regarding the regulation, compliance, jurisdiction, and if you're not defining the circular economy or tokenomics properly, I mean the reward system and loyalty, it will not be sustainable, and also it will not grow. And we need to work with the governments, especially because it is a crypto and regulated kind of thing. So lot of jurisdictions are not allowing even to allow the tokenization platform to work on what you can say the large competition environments. So I mean, can you provide the view? This is just my observation or experience, but I would like to take your inputs.
No, absolutely. I think what you're raising is that we have the dilemma that while blockchain is global, the individual jurisdictions are very much national law and national driven. And I think it is an impediment if I want to launch a service, for example, around circularity, sustainability, and issue a token, that may not be allowed in every country or not to the same degree as you would intend it to be. That's a bit, I think, your question, yeah? Yeah. So I think that issue is real. So we have a lot of clients that are struggling with that, and we do a lot of work actually also talking about the compliance around these things. Now, I think that regulation is on the move. I think the regulators have woken up and they need to deal with this. And we're starting to see, hopefully, a bit of a snowball effect now to say, that decisions being taken in one leading jurisdiction, they are being imitated in other jurisdictions not directly affected by it. So I do hope that this has an educative effect on the overall industry. And as you are able to prove a certain business value in one jurisdiction, the other jurisdictions are almost forced to also allow these kind of business models in their jurisdictions as well. But we are not there yet. I absolutely agree. Yeah.
Yeah, and also the circular economy or tokenomics, if you are not providing that, they will not have a sustainability and there will not be growth.
Yes, 100%. I think there was another question over there, the gentleman in the middle.
Let's catch it, mate, yeah?
Nice catch.
Thank you for your presentation. Could you scroll back to a previous slide that shows the interconnected industries? I think. Yeah, this one. So this is a very fascinating slide because blockchain as a technology has the potential to connect and transform physical, cultural, and personal aspects of human society. My question is, and it kind of builds on what the previous person was saying, what do you see are the impediments of an integrated and global implementation of the semantic web? Also, how do you imagine, what is your vision of that future?
So let me maybe share a bit my overall vision of how that future looks like, and then where blockchain comes into play and how to get there. So when I talk, I mentioned in my introduction, I not only work in the Web3 and blockchain space, but I also am responsible for our IoT and our extended reality business. Now, you might think this is kind of a gathering of weird or emerging technologies that have nothing to do with each other. But in my state of mind, they are all interconnected. What do I mean by it? IoT is essentially the bridge between the physical world and the digital world. It allows, through sensors, to reflect what's happening in the physical world and inform the digital world with it. Now, extended reality is actually the access point where we can access the digital world all around us. So it brings the digital world into our physical world. And very quickly we will have the possibility with glasses as lean as the one that the gentleman here is having on his temples, to be interconnectedly interacting with the digital world and the physical world. Now add AI and generative AI into that mix, and you suddenly have an embodiment of AI in the digital world. You can have avatars that are as intelligent or conversant as a human around you that you can interact with. And robotics then brings that back into the physical world. So that will be the world we are inhabiting. Now, that will mean that data explodes. The amount of data that gets transacted explodes. And the issue we are running into is we are running into a crisis of trust. Very quickly, it will be very difficult to trust if what you are seeing and hearing and listening and reading is actually true. And the people are who they say they are, they own what they say they own, and they transact what they say they transact. And blockchain has the fundamental power to establish trust in such a world. Now, all of these vectors are already in motion, and they're happening, to be honest, regardless of regulation. Right? The issue is that blockchain is very heavily regulated on that level. But I think that humanity has to step up in order to enable that, because otherwise the repercussions of such a digitized world that you can no longer trust in will be so big that the costs will be overbearing. There was another question right next to that, and then maybe we do a couple of them more. Please.
Thank you. You mentioned that one of the key reasons that startups fail is not understanding the kind of the client demand and the importance of gathering feedback. And then we also talked about the fact that new ideas are often strongly opposed and ridiculed. So I'm just interested, especially from the perspective of startups, how they can take on board both of those points. They seem,
Yeah. So I would probably say that Schopenhauer was a better philosopher than maybe a startup mentor. So I wouldn't build your startup solely on the hope of getting to the self-evident phase. But I think for startups, as I mentioned before, is you really need to think so hard around what the problem is. I think that somebody else said it, you need to be falling in love with a problem, not a solution. And that's hard because we all love the technical solutions we're working on. We see that it all makes sense. And when we are at a conference like this, where all of us are preaching to the choir. But the reality is we need to not be talking to us, we need to be talking to the ones that take the business decisions today. And they, as I said today, the technical features of the solution come at number 7. Ranked number 7. There are 6 other reasons that are more on top of mind. These are busy decision takers, typically number 7 you don't care about anymore, right? So really talk the language of the person you are talking to, And to be honest, that's maybe a bit the unfair advantage that we have as consultants, right? Because we have the actual business consulting arm that is helping with this, each C-level suite on their problems, with the CFO with CFO problems, CMO with CMO problems, CEO with CEO problems, and then you connect kind of the right technology to that problem. And oftentimes it means that you also need to be honest and say, for that specific problem, yes, down the line, there could be blockchain as a good solution, but if I'm honest with myself, I'm not at a 30 to 40% uplift today. I might be there when a lot of other stuff fall into place, but then it's just not worth pushing it. Yeah, so you really need to say, where do I make a dent today? And there you need to go deep very quickly. Yeah, I think we have time for a couple of more questions.
Hi, my name is Ty Everett of Project Babbage. Blockchain does enable data without question, but how dangerous is fragmentation? Like, do you perceive there to be a danger in companies, maybe they are trying to build and solve similar problems, they capture small fractions of the solution, but big ideas like digital identity, right? How important is it that when people are trying to solve these bigger things that require coordination, that they work together and try to standardize and interoperate?
No, that's a great question. I think that's one of the untold issues around Web3 is that we are actually trying to build the next version of the internet, but in a super patchy way. Like, we're working on all of the layers of the stack simultaneously. And that's not a very efficient or coordinated way to do so. Yeah? And we feel the pain every day, right? So standardization plays a big role, but standardization is hard, right? And so there's always this big debate around the value of decentralization or what people think it means. And I think we need to move away from thinking that decentralizing everything is a good idea. I think we need to be very literate and liberate around where it does make sense to be decentralized, where we want to have heterogeneity and competition and, you know, the diversity, and where do we actually want to have, you know, standards where everybody can agree on. And I think that's something that is something that when you look at stacks, you need to very deliberately look into. And here again, I think Europe, in some degree, is leading the way with certain standards that come from a regulatory perspective. I think other standards are being made. But I think we need to be much more differentiated. Where do we actually want to differentiate, and where do we actually want to agree on a common framework? I'm not sure if there was any more question. One over there.
Thank you very much. Does this work?
Yes, it works.
Okay, cool. Thanks. So you talk a lot about building businesses on blockchain, but how do you qualify a blockchain as being fit to build on? What are the qualities you look for in a blockchain?
Can you move the mic a bit closer to you?
Sorry, I was saying, what are the qualities you look for in a blockchain to build an enterprise on?
It's a good one. So it's an interesting question because, as I said, oftentimes clients, they actually don't really care. So that's what I think they said. And here, I think what's interesting is that when we look at different, I mean, obviously we are a bit of an intermediary here. There are some scenarios where a client has already set their mind on a specific blockchain, and then we come in, we help them more with kind of the monetization, the ecosystem around it. And there are other times where we are asked to say, you know, what kind of blockchain we would propose, right, for a certain use case. And I think here, to some degree, it's really horses for courses, right? I think not every use case requires, you know, the same degree of technical features. Oftentimes, the things that are surrounding a blockchain are also quite relevant. Like, for example, is there already an existing ecosystem running on top of that? What is also the amount of support that the blockchain brings to the table? We see a lot of blockchains that have very professionalized business development teams, sometimes to the degree that they have product management as a service to drive their ecosystem. And I think that has been a reason where many, let's say, technically inferior blockchains have actually fared quite well, because they have a very holistic view of doing so. And I think what this means for blockchains that are very powerful on the technical level is, I think, it's not enough to just stay on your high horse, so to speak, and say, I'm technically the best, and that's why everybody needs to come to me. I think you need to make the effort, explaining it, again, going back to the business value, to say, articulate what's the actual business value that my technical superiority brings to the table. And I think you need to also bridge the non-technical part to say, am I able to translate that into solutions? Can I drive the support of an ecosystem that then actually is becoming powerful down the line as well? There's one more question in the front, and then the second one as well there. One over here, and then the other one over there.
Hello. Can you share any observations as to either organizational values or specific points of readiness in organizations where they are actually ready to consider or adopt new technology? I'm speaking as someone who's been in situations of acquisition specifically where objectively superior technology was discarded in favor of existing legacy system, either because of cost or other reasons.
So if I understand the question correctly, it's like what role does also, I think, the readiness of organization play when it's about deciding between technologies, because sometimes irrational decisions happen where superior technology gets discarded for legacy system. Was that a bit the question? I'm not sure if it's...
All right.
Yeah.
I was more asking whether you, from your experience, see any commonalities in organizations in terms of where they are, at what point they might be, where you know as somebody who's pitching or internally pitching a technology like that, would, you know, how do you know where's a good time, or whether there's some, you know, specific values the organizations foster that make them more open to that proposition?
No, that's a good question. And I think when I get asked kind of which industries or kind of which type of organizations are further along kind of that maturity, it's actually hard for me to pinpoint specific industries or countries or size of company, because in every country, in every industry, in every size of company, you have the skeptics and you have kind of the ones who are open. And the skeptics, they will always find a reason why it's not the right thing to do, not the right moment, where other things are more important. So, to be honest, I oftentimes stop trying to convince the ones that are skeptic. I rather stick to the ones that are open, because you still need some openness to experiment. But I think a key enabler is really if you can articulate the business value. And I think we will see with adoption that the flywheel effect will kick in, and it will be harder and harder to say no to the benefits that blockchain can bring. Good. I'm not sure if we can do one last question or if we're at time. I think we're unfortunately at time. Happy to catch you later. Thank you so much.